welcome to The Breadwinners. I'm Jennifer Owens.
I'm Rachel Ellison.
This is a show where we talk about everything work and family, and really only the best companies. That's never true. But today it is true for our big season 4 finale. We are joined today by the inestimable founder, fighter, and fan of Working Mothers Everywhere, Carol Evans. Welcome to The Breadwinners, Carol.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jennifer and Raquel.
So longtime listeners of The Breadwinners may know that I reference Carol's work at the drop of a hat. So, maybe you don't need an intro, but in a nutshell, Carol was part of the team that launched Working Mother magazine in 1978. And then we talk about that a lot, but we're going to go a little in the future to 1986 when she created what we're going to talk about today, which is the Working Mother Best Companies and its many sisters, including Best Companies for Multicultural Women, Best Law Firms for Women. At one point we did Best Companies for Hourly Workers. She would go on to lead a lot of other iconic titles before returning to Buy Working Mother in 2001, becoming the first and only working mother to own Working Mother and make it into Working Mother Media. It lasted 44 years, and that is kind of an awesome but also kind of sad point of reference there, Carol.
I know. I'm very weepy about it.
But, you grew that, at the time, the business that you had bought into Working Mother Media, you built out its content and its research and its event businesses. You acquired the National Association for Female Executives and Diversity Best Practices. And the one, you've won many awards and honored many times, but in fact, I got the chance to pick up an award for you once. So I got to pretend I was Carol Evans for a hot second at SHRM. But in 2012, do you remember that you were named to Ad Age's 100 Most Influential Women in Advertising?
Yes, that was really great.
That's really cool. So just a little background of, who Carol is and why we're talking today. And then today she serves as CEO and executive director of Share Cancer Support, which serves women with breast, ovarian, uterine, how do you say endometrial? Is that
Yes.
Cervical and metastatic breast cancer. So, all right, now that our time is up, thanks so much for joining us, Carol.
It was great to be on.
So before we go back in time, which we're always going in the time machine, we're going to take a break for our sponsors.
Growing a successful business has never been easy. But whether you're navigating a complex industry or trying to reinvent one, our breadth of banking experts are here to collaborate on market-proven solutions. At KeyBank, we're built to grow with your changing needs because we're not just here for the business you are now, we're here for the business you'll become. Reimagine business as usual. KeyBank opens doors. Learn more at key.com/B2B.
When you need to build up your team to handle the growing chaos at work, use Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It gives your job post the boost it needs to be seen and helps reach people with the right skills, certifications, and more. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need a hiring hero? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
And we're back, and we're ready to get back into our time machine. So, back to 1985. So, what was happening at Working Mother back then? And where were we as a media entity and leading into what was the thinking behind doing a Best Companies list?
Well, we had gotten pretty far. In 1978, we launched as a one-shot. It was the brainchild of Vivian Cadden, who was, like a social justice person back in the union busting times, and her husband was a union organizer. Anyway, she thought of this idea of having a magazine just for working mothers, and they tried it, and it was a huge success. And then, it just kept growing and growing, and from one issue to 6 to 12 and all this great stuff.
Oh, the typical thing where, you get a small run, like almost like TV shows. You get a small mid-season replacement and then, they buy in for the full thing. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that happened in those years. And it was really a exciting time because we were a small magazine owned by a great big magazine, McCall Publishing Company. So we had lots of resources, but we had to find our way because, they had never launched a brand new magazine before. So it was marvelous. And by 1985, we were doing a few events. We had really found our voice. We knew that what we wanted to do was to make life better for working mothers, not just to be, a magazine that was entertaining. We really wanted to make a difference. So we were trying to find a way to get very, very concrete. And Vivian Cadden, again, who was still with us at that time, she had the idea of comparing companies to each other. And her basic premise was, if you have Joe and Jim compete for an award, they will all do better at what you want.
Smart.
And all the CEOs back then were Joe and Jim. There weren't any Janes,
Yeah.
Right.
And so, and she just played off of the kind of ego and the kind of competitiveness of the CEOs. And it was a really smart idea, because the first thing she did was just to do a survey of who was doing anything for working mothers.
Yeah.
What companies were paying any attention to this relatively unheralded demographic? And what she found was that there were companies who were being very progressive, but they were few and far between. And she only found 20 companies that first year that were worth remarking about.
That's interesting. I want to dive in a little bit deeper to how did she decide? What were the criteria used to judge those 20?
It was really simple. It was basically 5 points. Mm-hmm. And they asked all the companies if they were doing anything for childcare, what they were doing for maternity leave, and if they had services for women that were like concierge services. And I think there was one, maybe there were 2 other, but I can't remember what they were, but they were very basic kinds of things. And most companies weren't doing any of that, but there were these 20 companies who were doing quite a bit, actually. They all got really good scores. And it was on a 5-point scale, and it was like 5 hearts.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
You had to get 5 hearts you could get 3 to 5 hearts to be on the list. So it was very, very sweet. And it wasn't very, it wasn't a lot of data. Like later, we just had reams and reams and reams of data. And this is 5 data points.
Right. That's true. That's very true.
But interestingly, 2 of the companies that made it on that list that first year stayed on the list all the years of the list forever and ever. And that was IBM and Johnson & Johnson.
And still progressive, we would still go to them to ask them, where was the future going, like 30 years later? Because
absolutely.
Do you know how many times I had to look at that first issue? Because I had to do the anniversary issue twice.
Oh, yes. Well, we did
You're bringing me PTSD with those hearts and all that. So, yeah.
We did the anniversary every 10 years. So, that was, we did a lot of them.
Hello. We did it every 5 years. Thank you very much. We're in publishing. We need an event. So
that's right. I forgot. It was every 5 years. You're right. Well, anyway.
So this is always the time where I'll pop quiz Raquel. So I won't do it this time. This is what the best companies offered that first year. The average. 6 weeks of partially paid maternity leave, 4% offered paternity leave, and 7 offered on-site childcare, which at the time was like, that's the gold standard. And all of these things, it was shocking to get to see that anybody was doing anything. And so I'm going to send to you, Raquel, what the last data I could find, which was from 2019.
Okay. By 2019, there were 100 best companies, and they offered an average of 11 weeks fully paid maternity leave. That's 4 weeks longer than it was 5 years ago, and nearly 3 times as much as the national average. 57% give all parents equal leave, regardless of gender. 81% let employees phase back into the work gradually after parental leave for an average of 13 weeks. 41% have a program to rehire moms who have been out of the workforce for at least 3 years.
Yeah, I think that's really it was a big, huge leap forward in those years. And some of the things that you're citing here in 2019 weren't even thought of back
Yeah.
in 1986, like gender neutral parental leave was very, very unknown in 1986. And it really became a big thing for all companies. And a phase back, nobody had really thought of phase back. You just went out for your 6 weeks if you were lucky,
Yeah.
right back, and you had to come back full time, full steam, full head. And phase back is such a wonderfully humane way of approaching parental leave. And then, the childcare on site was such a huge thing because the big corporations that had big headquarters back then, they would create a giant footprint for the childcare center. And it was wonderful. I remember one of our companies, I think it was Abbott, had 700 children in their childcare center
Wow.
on site. Huge companies with huge workforces and big headquarters. That's what led to that. So it got to be the point where everyone thought that you had to have an on-site childcare center to make the list. And that wasn't true. It was never true.
That's right. I
Yeah.
remember those conversations, right? And then I had Owen when I had just joined Working Mother, and so he was tiny. And what I loved was people talking about giving you subsidies because and previously when I had Gwen, I worked at Condé Nast, and their on-site childcare, which sounded great when I was single, was in Times Square. And there was no way I was going to take my tiny newborn from Brooklyn to just it didn't work with my life to do
Yeah,
it that
no.
way.
And New York City was particularly hard because of that. Nobody wanted to take their child to Times Square anyway.
Yeah.
Not their little itty bitty baby, but that's why backup childcare became so popular. Was if the child was sick or if you had an emergency, then you would get backup. I always felt that I preferred subsidies because
Yeah.
backup just seemed to be an emergency situation, which everybody should have. But it was very popular.
Mm.
Yeah. Did you ever have access to childcare in your work life, Raquel? Like through an employer?
No.
No. Yeah. I mean, that was it. That was the only time was Condé Nast, and it was really nice. But it's like, ooh, this seems a
Yeah,
lot of.
I never
You know,
did either.
I don't need to go buy the off-brand Spider-Man on the way to childcare every day. So, I don't need that. My baby Bjorn on the subway. Like, no.
The singing cowboy. I mean, really, what
Yeah.
child wants to hear that?
Nobody needs to hear that. So, well, can we talk a little bit about the competitive nature of these
Yeah.
companies? Because I remember being on many difficult calls and presentations, like also very happy ones. But we also had a benchmarking aspect of this where you could see how the companies did versus the group and do some cuts of the data for them. And so when a company fell out of the top 10 or on the list altogether, those were some tough calls. But also, I vividly remember seeing HR and work life executives kind of pleased to have somebody outside of their company say, see, this is, we told you
Right.
this.
Yeah, it was great because there were work life professionals in charge of these programs. And when they saw they were dropping down the list, I mean, because we always told them what rank they were, even though we didn't publish the ranking except the top 10, but they would see their numbers fall. They knew what kind of programs weren't being added to keep up with important trends, or they saw one CEO cut back on support. So they knew. And so they would, it was like wink, wink. We would call them and say, I'm sorry, but you're 98, you're going to fall off the list next year. And they'd be like, oh, or we call them and say you fell off the list. And they'd be like, oh, good. We really need some internal help to get this back on track. And so then we would just put together all the data for them and they'd take it to their leaders and say, we are doing terrible at this. And look, Working Mother magazine says so. So it was wonderful. It was kind of like, the secret behind the door. They wanted, better services for their employees, and we could prove that they were not staying competitive. So yeah, that was a delight. in terms of competition too, oh my gosh, the companies really, really cared about this, and they would take great pains to, keep track of their competitors. So, Colgate, Palmolive versus Procter and Gamble, they would know everything about what their competitors were doing by reading the data in our list as well as they could interpret. So, that was always fun because it wasn't just being one of the 100 best, it was being one of the 100 best in your competitive set.
Right.
We had 15 hospitals on the list most years, and that was because the hospitals were very, very eager to prove that they were great places for their women employees, because women patients are so important to them. So yeah, so it was really interesting to see that how the competitive sets kind of played out and moved ahead.
Hmm. How did the application change over the years? I'm guessing it wasn't exactly the same when you started as where you ended up.
No, hardly. I mean, it started as, who's doing what? How can we find them?
Right.
And then we turned it eventually, I mean, pretty quickly, we turned it into a real data collection process, and the companies had to apply. They were on their best behavior with their data because if we published, essential numbers, and if we published a number that wasn't known by their employees or didn't
Oh,
resonate with
yeah.
the employees, oh yeah, the employees, they'd hear about it like, we don't have 12 weeks of maternity leave.
Oh, wow.
I don't get this. And sometimes the companies at that stage, they were giving different benefits to their executives. And so the middle managers would be like, wait a minute, we don't have any of this. And that was a great way to push the companies forward, was to make these benefits available to all. That was huge. The other thing was that, and this was a great trick that we pulled, and Jennifer was very familiar with this. It was really important that they didn't just brag about benefits that they had on the books. We realized that some companies were putting benefits on the books and not offering them
Oh,
to
yeah.
employees. Yeah. So an employee would be like, I read the employee handbook and I didn't see that. It was like putting your benefits under a bushel. And so we said, you have to prove usage and how many women use this benefit. And when we made that change, that was quite a way in. When we made that change on usage, it changed everything because the companies were kind of like called out. And if they didn't have the usage, they didn't make the list anymore. I remember, I don't know, Jennifer, if you remember this, but I remember going to Ford Motor Company and they said, we can't track usage. And I said, well, then you can't make the list because you're not going to make the list if you don't
Yeah.
track usage. And so they started tracking usage. And of course, it really wasn't that hard because they have
the HR systems, right?
the SAS, the SAS system, they had it all the data, but they didn't want to look at it before this.
Oh my God. Can we please tell the story of, I believe it was you and me, we were at the Marriott Marquis with McDonald's. Do you remember
Yeah.
this one?
Yeah.
And they said they wanted to have drinks with us before, like it must have been the Work Life Congress or something. And they presented us with a two-sided one piece of paper. And they said, this is all we're going to give you for assessing the company. And it was like, and I really held my breath because, you want McDonald's. And McDonald's is also an odd company because they have, for us, because it's the headquarters, but then they have all the franchises. So you see the company as this massive company, but the actual, headquarters was a core group of employees, the whole thing, it was whatever. And you were like, well, that's not going to work.
Yeah. I said, well, that's your criteria, but it doesn't work for us because we have our criteria and it's our list. And
Yeah.
I told them they'd just have to go back and say they weren't going to make the list this year because they couldn't make it with that amount of data.
Yeah. And because it's hard because if you let, it's like parenting, you have to be consistent. If you let one company, I'm going to sound rough, like get away with something without giving us data, but somehow, we're going to whisper it to you, but you're not going to be, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You're just going to give license to everyone else to try to pull the same thing. And that doesn't help the employees in the end.
You have to be really consistent with the companies and you have to draw the line. And we also had one other rule that was really difficult to for the companies, which was that if they were sued by female employees over female issues, that they would automatically be off the list for 2 years.
Yeah.
And that really shook up a lot of companies. I won't mention names because it's,
I would, but yeah.
Because the women would sue, and whether they lost or not, if they were involved in a big lawsuit, that was it. But so we had to really stick that rule hard because, it was very painful for them. And of course,
we had to keep changing the application in that sense. You think of the topics you do, but every year you learn something new. Like what level of lawsuit, because every company gets sued.
Yes.
It's a fact of life. And so we have to set levels of what constitutes us kicking you off the list, like just that area. Everything is a rabbit hole that you have to follow and try to strengthen the application in good ways.
Well, you strengthened it a lot. I mean, you had a lot of very strong ideas. And, interesting about the application process.
Thank you for that polite way of saying that.
You were very demanding and insistent. Let's put it that way. But, we used to have an outside consultant do it for years and years. And then we realized that we just needed to have a better grasp on the data internally. And so that's when we launched the Working Mother Institute under your tutelage. And that's when we were able to bring in all the researchers internally and do the list ourselves, which we did for years and years. What much better system for us because we could really gauge the fine points of the data because we were so involved in it.
Very true. Well, so I'm going to name drop right now, but I once received a call. I was walking the kids down the street to PS 29, and it was the White House.
Yes.
And they wanted to know, this was the Obama administration era, if we would consider adding a question on paid transparency to the application.
Right.
As in, because they had just done, well, not just, but they, Lilly Ledbetter was the first law that Obama signed into action. And so they were following up with paycheck fairness. And so they wanted us to do a question on whether or not companies were giving you a hard time or now the word, it's early in the morning, the words could leave me, that you'd get in trouble for announcing your salary publicly.
Yeah, pay transparency, yeah.
And so I'll say, honestly, my first thought, literally walking down the block was, well, we'll take that under advisement. You don't, we don't, you don't tell us what to do, Mr. President.
Mr. Obama.
Yeah, Mr. Obama's, third tier, chief of staff person. And meanwhile, side note, we got these requests all year long. Our lovely right-hand woman on all things with the best companies, Kristen Willoughby, had an ongoing conversation with all the companies because they'd say, could you ask about this? Or why are you asking about that? And so we would reopen the application every time. But yeah, at first I was like, get in line, buddy. And then I realized, like, oh my God, the White House is asking us to ask a question.
That was a great story. We formed a really great relationship with the White House because of that. And I remember I was asked to be the opening act for Michelle Obama on the occasion of the 90th anniversary of the Women's Bureau. And it was such a wonderful experience. I opened up with a speech, not an opening act like singing, but I opened up with a speech about my own mother and who had been born in 1920, which was the same year that the Women's Bureau was formed. And so I made a parallel of, what my mother experienced as a working mother versus the kind of development of working mothers in general. And Michelle Obama listened to my speech and loved it. And I remember when I saw her, the only thing I could think of was, oh my gosh, she's so tall.
These are the things we think about,
Yes. And she's wearing flats. Oh my God. Remember she always wore flats? Oh, kind of her.
We really did have fun doing all this stuff,
Oh, we did.
You look like you were having fun doing this stuff.
We really were. It was a lot of fun. And you know what? It was fun too, because at some point we decided that we needed to make a lot more of the working mothers that worked for these companies. And we invented the Working Mother of the Year, which was each company of the 100 Best list was able to name a Working Mother of the Year. And then we celebrated all 100 Working Mothers of the Year at our big annual gala. And that just put such a human story to the numbers.
Yeah.
And so many really just, heartbreaking, wonderful, tragic, happy, everything
Yep.
as human stories are.
Do you remember with that, we had a company call us and say that they were nominating trans women to be
Yes.
Mother of the Year. And did we have a problem with that? And I'm
Yes.
like, no, is she a mom? Like whatever. And we
Yeah.
got all kinds of coverage for that. And it really just,
We
I'm
got
like,
all
why would this be an issue?
Yeah, and she spoke at one of our conferences for diversity best practices another year. But, in a odd way, it was kind of difficult because the attention that she got led to her having some real difficulty in her career because she got
Oh man.
the spotlight. Yeah, it was very difficult for her, which is what happens sometimes, But
Yeah.
but yeah, and I remember one of our Working Mothers of the Year passed away from a very difficult
Oh
disease,
yes.
and her husband got up and accepted the award for her, and it was just like, it was 1,000 people in the audience crying. It
Yeah.
was
Always crying.
so
Yep.
sweet.
Always tearing up.
Yeah, it was so very sweet.
Well, so this is where I have to also tell the story of your mandate to cut 100 questions from the application.
Oh yeah, that was fun.
Because to your question, Raquel, what also would happen is that it would just grow. The questions, and then and each one's a sacred cow. Because
Yeah,
how are you
sure.
not going to ask about, I care about this? Or if we don't ask about paternity leave, there's no contextual comparison to the women. And then what about adoptive parents?
Right.
So we ended up cutting 150. It's one of Krista Carruthers and Kristen Willoughby and myself will take it as one of our greatest achievements. Is
It
that we
was.
did you 50 better.
I
But
was so proud of you. I was so very proud of you because, we're all good at adding questions, but taking questions away was a
Oh.
real challenge. And, we worried about the integrity of the data on a timeline. That was a huge issue too, because we wanted to make sure we had comparisons, but some stuff just got old too. Like I remember concierge services, if you had a post office and a dry cleaner and a whatever, all these things on site. That was a huge benefit for many years. And then all of a sudden, it just became much less and less relevant.
yeah.
I think you cut all of those questions out, and that was really helpful.
Did it as a drop down. That was the greatest achievement. Was it becomes one question, they can just click it off. That's actually survey construction tips.
Oh, that's great. Wasn't that wonderful? Oh, my God.
Very good. So yes, our lovely research team was very helpful in doing some question structure. So,
Nice.
but and then I used to always tell that I made the same awful joke every year. We had that pre-event at the Work Life Congress where all the the advocates who filled out that all blessings upon them who filled out the application every year would come and
Yes.
they'd ask her questions or make suggestions. And I'd always say, well, we could cut, about 150 questions if we had federally mandated paid leave in this country.
Right.
And then
Right.
there'd be a certain,
Mhm.
and I can't believe I can still make that joke. I mean,
Yeah.
what is it
I
freaking
can't
going to
either.
take to have that here?
It's really sad and really sick. I mean, just unbelievable how this country hasn't moved forward. In fact, now we're just moving backwards, as we all know, on women's rights.
Mm.
And, someday we might not be able to take contraception, which really appalls me. But yeah, it's hardly believable that we haven't made progress on, mandated paid maternity leave for everyone and mandated childcare. Although the federal government does require childcare for all of its employees, so that's very, very nice. And they have some fabulous childcare centers in these wonderful government buildings in DC.
Yeah, which that's always it sets a bar that others all these things are steps in the right direction. It's just how many steps.
Right.
Too many
A very
steps.
tall staircase.
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure.
And now that we have this, an attack on basic women's rights, it feels like it's going to set back all of this work, because if we can't have, some of the control of our bodies or anything like that, then how do we offer, you know, mandated paid maternity leave and, all the childcare benefits that we have? I mean, how do we get
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah, that's a great point.
I felt that way with the rise of the Me Too movement. It knocked me on my heels in the sense of how unsafe we still are at work. And here we are, I'd like, oh wait, we're talking like 3 steps beyond this. I just want bodily safety. And now it's like I just want bodily autonomy.
Right.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, and so many women want the same thing. It's really the majority wish versus the majority rule, and that's what makes me so sad. Is that
Yeah.
women want these benefits for themselves as mothers and for each other as mothers, and they want control over their bodies for each other and for themselves. So it's like, let the public rule, and that's just not happening. So it's sad.
Well, and meanwhile, the conversations though, like at the Work Life Congress, so that would be the winner. We'd invite the winners and the Working Mothers of the Year for the gala that we would have. And then other companies would come to. Like, it's a long, long conversation that was started by all of this. But do you have any way to kind of encapsulate the way the conversation changed through this? Like what you saw at the events and hearing people make change in a positive way?
Yeah, one thing was that at the events first, all the top 10 speakers were men.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that was so indicative. And then gradually, our winners started to realize that, hey, we have some really top level women. Maybe
Oh
we
my
should
God,
put
share
them
the
on.
stage, dudes.
Yeah.
Share the stage.
Share the spotlight. So that was something really funny. And I think that over the years, it became, less like, oh, we're so grateful for the work you're doing, and more like, we feel that you can do more. I mean, I had to go from being just, cheerleading the companies because so few companies were doing, not very much. I mean, so many companies were doing so little. And so then I had to shift to when it got to be, much more of a acceptable principle, founding principle, then I had to really kind of like ask the CEOs and talk to the CEOs and use that podium to get people to do more and to not get complacent and to not just stand on their laurels. And that was the rallying cry, was take next steps. What are the next steps? What are the marching orders for what companies should do next? So we went from being kind of laudatory and just, grateful to being, warriors and
Yeah.
champions of change. And I think that's really appropriate because, you start small and then you get your power
Hmm.
from being able to recognize what is not happening, and you start to really challenge, where we are.
Hmm. And then what led you to expand into other variations? So, best companies for multicultural women. What made you take that leap?
Well, what happened was when I bought the company in 2001, I was there for the first 10 years, and then I left for 12 years, came back and bought the company and stayed for a long time.
Thank you.
But what happened was that when I came back in 2001, I bought the company 3 weeks before 9/11. So it was a tumultuous time
Hmm.
to acquire a company, to say the least. But I could go into that, but that's a whole other story. But what happened was that I saw that they had developed the list and they had really professionalized it a lot from when I had left. And then I was thinking about how successful it had been. It had gotten to 100 companies and all that. And I decided that this was a model. It wasn't just a one thing phenomenon, it was a model. And the model could be applied almost to anything that needed, a cohesive kind of support for change.
Hmm.
The first thing that I identified as needing so much work and support were women of color. And they were really just not keeping up in terms of salary and position and promotion. They were just not being treated in an equitable manner at all. It was very obvious, it was very apparent, but what to do about this massive problem? So we started the first list for the best companies for women of color. And boy, that's what we called it at first, because we wanted to make a real statement that multicultural can sound a little bit more soft, but women of color was really, this is the point. This is who we're talking about. And it was really interesting because we consulted with a whole lot of experts in diversity and inclusion about this. And a lot of them said, look, Carol, this is a great idea, but we don't think you're going to even find 10 companies. We were just looking for 10.
Oh, wow.
We lowered our standards to 10 because it was such a difficult thing. And they were like, I think you're going to find 0. Well,
Wow.
So we did the kind of methodology that we started Working Mothers List, which was, finding out what people were doing. Oh boy, it was hard. It was hard to find 10 because, if you put representation of women of color in the equation at all, it became very difficult because the representation at the top and the middle was really low.
Mm.
So we really had to base it at first on programs and policies instead of representation. And we knew, just like, because of what had happened with Working Mother, we knew that we could grow the list to not just be about programs and policies, but we could layer much more in as we developed people's thinking about equity for women of color in the workplace. So yeah, it was a very big challenge. People thought I was crazy.
The first thing you told me about it was, so this is the list that companies are afraid to win.
Right.
Because no one's doing enough and they know they're not doing enough.
Oh, that's hilarious. I forgot that. Yeah. They were terrified that if they made this list, that their women of color employees would call them out. And that happened.
Yeah.
Women of color would be like, what? We made this list? How could we make this list? Things are so bad here for us. How could we have made this list? And then we would explain, seriously, that this was based on programs and policies and that we would get to representation soon.
Which we eventually did. It still was a rough, when you do those averages of, not the strongest numbers, but, at least let's be out there.
Yeah.
Let's say what it is, and then we can improve from there.
Yeah, it was very important. And you layered that representation in a really good way because, let's say it would be 8% middle managers were women of color.
The drop off. Oh my gosh. PTSD of those drop off numbers. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And then you go up.
It'd be 3% of corporate executives. Oh my gosh.
And then, 0% of CEOs would be women of color, of course.
Yeah.
And, it was just, you could count on, 2 fingers how many people were women of color CEOs. It was just really, 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 difficult. I mean, it was almost painful to look at those numbers, and we had to share them with the world. And, basically what we said was, these are still the best.
Right.
I mean, they may have this low representation, they have strong programs, and they're still better than everybody else, period. So I think that was a shocking thing. And I think that it really, we had a lot of really goodwill and good faith with the 100 best companies. So they trusted us. And when we did this work, they paid attention. And, I just think that the whole world was starting to look at this, and we gave them data.
Yeah. And you sold them on it. I mean, I think that's the part that, people see the event, Multicultural Women National Conference. Oh my gosh, that's the best event we ever did every year. With Janet Wigfield, who would organize the same race, cross race discussions.
Yes.
Fantastic. We did them every year. The men were their own race. Hilarious joke every year. We just put all the men at one table.
Because there were only like 7 of them.
Yeah.
Right.
Who came. They were the brave ones. The first year there were 2 men, and we put them in a little room by themselves to have a breakout session. It was really fun. And then, of course, we did the men's panel at the Women of Color Conference. And I got to tell you, those first 5 years of that, the men made some horrific mistakes on stage.
Yeah.
And they got called out for it by the women in the audience. It was pretty good. It was really good. But
But the best.
yeah,
Getting to be on stage with LaQuanda Murray, one of my favorite people in the world, and presenting awards, and I just loved it. What a great experience is to be in this room of all these wonderful women executives talking about where we need to go, what we need to be doing,
Mm,
and doing it in a way that's theirs.
yeah,
It's
and
not mine, it's theirs, and we better run and catch up.
yeah, and also one of the things I loved about the conference was that we made sure that there were lots of white women there too, because I mean, the white women would be in a minority, of course, at the conference. But if the white women weren't there, then how were they going to grow in this whole area?
Yeah.
And the white women had the power. I mean, the white
that's
women
so
were
true.
doing, especially as executives, not necessarily working mothers, but they were doing really well as executives. So, that became a really important point. It was kind of funny because the white women were like, what race? We're a race?
Yeah.
What do you mean talk about being white? What is there to say? And
It's hard being a woman, and it's like, wait, no, there's more to
right,
this story,
that's
my
when
love.
we talk about gender, right? It's still hard. I mean, because you put white women in a room and tell them to talk about whiteness, and it is
Yeah.
a big challenge for them. But it worked because they were suddenly aware that they were a race, and the reason why it didn't seem like they were was because they were the norm, and everything was
Mhm.
judged against whiteness. So it was just part of the whole picture of this, situation. But also, I wanted to mention that, I have brought up some of this thinking, Janet Wigfield's brilliant thinking, and she's helping me with it to share cancer support. We're doing a conference on June 24th about health equity. And the interesting thing is that, of course, the idea came to me because of the work we did for women of color at Working Mother. But I realized that after being here just a year, I realized that health equity was very much different by race. It was, all the female cancers that we serve. A woman facing uterine cancer would have different health disparities than a woman facing breast cancer. And so I'm sorry, that's not quite right. A Black woman would have different health disparities as she faced
Mm.
cancers than Asian woman, and so on. And so, and for Hispanic women, it was language. And for Black
Yeah.
women, it was trust, all kinds of things. So anyway, so I applied this kind of thinking, and we're doing a conference called Getting Our Fair Share, the 2022 Conference to End Health Disparities, where we break out by race.
Wow.
Yeah, we break out by race, and we have panels by race, and everybody gets to listen to the panels, and then they get to meet in their own racial groups and really work on their issues with health disparities. So yeah, so it goes forward.
Well, that's tremendous. That was the best part for me, is getting to hear all those different points of view that, you're in. I always talk about, your own networks tend to look like you, tend to
Yes.
be like you, like, oh, I'm from the Midwest. I know a lot of people from Cleveland, like that
Right.
kind of, you replicate yourself. And so get to be in a room and meet people with different points of view is just such a gift. So
Yeah, different histories, different concerns. It's really interesting. And the other, Raquel, you asked about the other types of lists that we did. And I think probably the most, one that made a lot of progress was our NAFI top companies for executive women that Betty Spence ran,
mm,
or still runs. And that was really, Betty had a vision that was, look at the CEOs.
yeah, hardcore representation. Where are the women?
It was all representation. I mean, we really didn't care that much what your programs were, because if they weren't working, then, and we were this far down the road with working women from World War II,
Yeah.
let's make some progress here. And it's still, though, a huge battle. There's still so few, female CEOs. I mean, I look at it this way, that even if it gets up to 25 or 30, whatever, that's still on the Fortune 500, that's still 470 men versus 30 women.
Right.
I just think people get excited about these tiny incremental changes, and it means very little in the sea of male dominance.
Well, and that number can go, one woman retires or leaves the profession and, the percentage falls from like 15% to 7.
Yeah, that's especially true when you're measuring color on the highest end there.
Oh, I know. It's like,
Yeah.
woo, like we got to keep Roz Brewer in for,
Right. Right, right. If she retires, we're in big trouble.
we're in big trouble, Also, friend of Working Mother, spoke at our events. And it's awesome now, too, to watch women that we featured at those events and then taking these bigger and bigger roles. And it's just, that's so exciting. Like
Yeah,
getting to follow these women's careers.
Rosalind Brewer was a VP in charge of.
Sam's Club?
No, she was at the diaper company in Wisconsin. I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, she was in charge of a division in the paper products, which were turned into diapers. And she was a VP, and then we had her on our stage, and she talked about how she would walk around the plant, and everybody would turn to the men with her and talk to them, and they would, even though they knew she was a CEO, they'd forget during the course of the tour. It was really wild stuff, but yeah, it was exciting to see women develop their careers, individual women develop their careers and do well. And we spent a lot of energy and a lot of time honoring them and putting them in the spotlight, which was really just wonderful.
And you cultivated the relationships with them, because the most amazing thing, Raquel, would be in a room, be sitting in Carol's office and say, well, we could do this, but we need someone to support it. Carol's like, wait 1 second. Boop, 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 boop. Hello? Okay. And then, yeah, they're in. Boop, boop, boop.
Amazing.
I don't know why she always said boop, boop, boop when she dialed her phone, but she did.
Yeah.
That was my favorite thing, was calling people and asking them to support the right thing.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. I still do it. I'm doing it over at Share. It's a joy. It just thrills me to ask people to step up and play the role that they can play in this work. If each person has a different role. Some of them are funders, some of them are researchers, some of them are executives making decisions, and some of them are assistants who are putting the data together. It's great.
Well, it's awesome. And so now I'm going to take a turn, though, and to say that even though I created 2 anniversary issues of The Best Companies for years 25 and 30, there were a lot of facts I would have loved to have searched for online, but the history of The Best Companies seemingly has disappeared with the loss this year of Working Mother and workingmother.com. And I will tell you that in my current role, someone asked me, she had been in charge. She's on the HR team here, and she was at Moody's, and they worked for years to get on the list. And she's like, "Where did all that go?" And I honestly don't know. And that The Best Companies, it's a lot of other parenting titles will touch on these topics, but it seemingly is gone. And so I don't know. I'm rambling at this point now, but
yeah.
What are you thinking about all of that?
First of all, the magazine industry has just been eaten alive by the internet, and that's right. Sad, because someday people are going to say, "What was a magazine?" and and a magazine is just such a joyful, delightful friend and companion for all of us that we need them. But so now we have our not so friendly and not so warm internet that can really do a lot of damage. But so it's gone. Working Mother went the way of a lot of magazines. It outlasted McCall's, its parent, and it outlasted many, 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 many women's magazines. But the economics have just gotten impossible for magazines, and I think that's sad. Of course, I think Saramount is what they changed the name of Working Mother Media to after I left to go work on Hillary's campaign. And I think they're still doing the 100 best companies for Saramount. So
okay,
it's just not under the Working Mother imprimatur, but the data goes on. The magazine, however, which was the the comfort and the soul of what we did, reaching individuals. That's gone, and it's not even online. And to me, that's a real sacrifice or sacrilege. I
It's a
don't know.
bummer.
It's a shame. And because when you're doing a magazine, Jennifer, as the editor of the magazine, more than me, you develop a real relationship with a million readers. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
that there's a million or 2 million of them, you develop a relationship with them in terms of knowing, what they're going to respond to. You have to, what they're going to need, what they need now, what they don't need now, and it changes all the time with the ebb and flow of our personal lives. So, that not being there for working mothers is sad. You have your breadwinner podcast, and that is so wonderful because honestly, podcasts are very intimate and very helpful on a personal level. So I think that, there are alternatives, but there's nothing that's, as big and bold and brassy and out there as Working Mother was. And that I really mourn.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah, me too.
Well, on that sad note, Raquel.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have used the word mourn. That's terrible.
You know what? To your point, though, media evolves. New generations of working mothers. When I moved on from Working Mother, and you pass it on to a new younger person with younger kids, because I think you kind of age out of that like hardcore, like Raquel has younger kids, she's dealing with stuff that's like, oh yeah, oh, I kind of remember, I'm dealing with a kid who's in another country right now. That's terrifying. So, it always needs a new generation, and maybe the new generation has new media.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful ways that working mothers can connect with each other. And my children are grown, so I don't have that either, that impetus to really find out about those services. But
you're on your own, Raquel. See ya.
Yeah, Raquel, it's there somewhere. Well, it's there in this podcast, and it's there, and I think a lot of those mediums. But I wanted Working Mother to go to TV and to go to radio and to do all this great stuff, and it just changed.
Yeah.
There's got to be something happier to talk about at the end. Come on, there's got to be.
No, I think there's always a future, and media survives, and working mothers need something each and every day, and so there's a business to be made for it. So
yes, and I do think that for any working mother that's listening, I think that what's important is that we have to keep battling for our rights as working mothers, and for the support that we deserve, and the support that our children deserve. The ongoing battle over politics should not be put aside, because there's not a magazine for working mothers. But
right.
We all have to pay attention. We all have to really, really do what we can to get our legislators to do the right thing and support the women who make up over half the workforce and are, just really in need of these benefits.
Carol, we just want to thank you so much for joining us. This was a really wonderful way to mark the end of season 4 of The Breadwinners. We're going to take our own summer vacation, and then we'll be back in the fall for season 5. Can you believe it, Jennifer?
No. Oh my God. So we've done about 170 odd episodes. It took that long to get ready to talk to Carol.
Exactly. We needed all that prep.
Oh my goodness. Well, I'm glad I could add a perspective. And, I salute you for doing this work. And Jennifer, you've always been doing this work. So, keep going. This is a wonderful podcast. I'm very proud of both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you can find us this summer when we're a little quiet. You can find us still on the socials. You can follow us everywhere at Breadwinners Podcast. And a reminder to share our show with your favorite breadwinner. But until next time, keep hustling.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.